This is your in-depth preview of what we can expect at David's multi-day preliminary hearing. The opportunity to finally see the prosecution's evidence against the singer accused of murdering a 14-year-old girl. We have new details about the hearing and a potential major witness. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime.
All rise.
I'm Jesse Weber. So tomorrow's the day. Day one of a multi-day preliminary hearing in the David murder case. This is where the prosecution is going to present evidence to convince the court, convince the judge that they have sufficient proof to support the charges for this case to move forward to trial. This is a probable cause standard. It is a lower standard, probable cause to support the charges. And remember what this is also about. This is about transparency, right? Because this is a case that has been shrouded in so much secrecy. This is an opportunity to finally see what the prosecution claims it has. So I wanted to do a preview of what we can expect, and I have some logistical details for you that I will tell you one person is pretty upset about. And I have an idea about a potential key witness, one of David's reported friends, someone we haven't spoken about a lot, but she just posted a video and it got me thinking. We'll get into that. Now, remember, David is the singer currently charged with first-degree murder, continuous sexual abuse of a child under 14, unlawful mutilation of human remains, all in connection with the death of 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez. Prosecutors allege that he was in a sexual relationship with her, that back on April 23rd, 2025, prosecutors allege that David lured her to his home in LA, stabbed her to death, allegedly watched her bleed out, which is an important detail that I'm going to get to, and then reportedly took horrifying measures to conceal this killing, all in an effort to keep her quiet about their relationship, to prevent her from coming forward, that this would have ruined his very successful, lucrative career. The special circumstances allegations, which carry heftier penalties, potentially the death penalty, include murder of a witness, murder for financial gain, lying in wait. Prosecutors allege that he used a deadly and dangerous weapon, a sharp instrument, to kill Celeste. And prosecutors allege that he purchased a blue inflatable pool, chainsaws, a body bag, heavy-duty laundry bags, that he dismembered her body, that he made suspicious trips to the Santa Barbara County area, that he lied to friends and associates about the alleged smell of decomposition in his residence. These are all the allegations. And it all culminates September 8th, 2025. That is the day after what would have been Celeste's 15th birthday that her dismembered, decomposed body is found, reportedly in the front trunk of a Tesla, allegedly registered to David at an LA tow yard. He has entered a not guilty plea, and he is innocent unless proven guilty. So that's where we're at. Now I got to go into this. So first things first, before I even get into the substance of what we can expect at this preliminary hearing, we received an update. We received a notice to all media. So this preliminary hearing is set to begin at 9:30 a.m. on Tuesday, July 21st, 2026, in Department 105 on the 9th floor of the Clara Shortridge Foltz Criminal Justice Center, with Judge Charlene F. Olmedo presiding. And this preliminary hearing is scheduled to last 3 days. And this part's key. It says, this notice, the court will hold a public lottery for public seats for the preliminary hearing. The court will conduct a public lottery for 10 public seats and 10 standby seats from 7:30 to 8:15 a.m. It's going to be on the first floor lobby of this courthouse on each day of the preliminary hearing. And then it says there's going to be no photography, video, or recording that is allowed in any courtroom, courthouse hallway, or lobby at any time, including the use of cell phones to capture pictures, video, or audio recordings. So you can see why this is going to be an issue in terms of transparency, right? Do you know who's not happy about this? Steve Fisher. We've had him on the program before, the private investigator who has been looking into this case. He was hired by the owner of the property where David was reportedly staying. This is the place near where the Tesla was reportedly towed. He took to X and he posted, quote, "The court is allowing only 10 members of the public into the preliminary hearing in the David case. That is outrageous and not how public access to the court should work. There is supposed to be a reasonable balance between seating for the press and seating for the public. This is a large courtroom, yet only 10 seats are being made available to the public. Her family has not appeared previously, and they could be called as witnesses. So they shouldn't be in the gallery anyway. They're not being held for that purpose. Not to mention, they're not allowing cameras even for the testimony that doesn't include CP. CP, I believe, to be child pornography because they claim that that's what David allegedly had on his devices. Documents have been sealed throughout the case, and now access to the courtroom is being severely restricted. At this point, it feels as though they are making up their own rules. Hashtag David, hashtag Celeste Rivas Hernandez. All right, look, a little bit of a 180 here, but I just have to call this out. For all you business owners out there, running a business, it's tough enough. Why make it harder doing things manually, relying on dozens of apps that don't really talk to each other, right? That's where our great sponsor, Odoo, comes in. So Odoo is an all-in-one business management platform with a full suite of integrated apps that seamlessly connect all your operations, from sales and accounting to manufacturing, shipping. Odoo can automatically generate professional, sleek-looking sales orders and invoices and vendor bills, and it can automatically assign sales teams and send email updates throughout each sales stage, and even use AI to pull reports that help with your decision making. And for manufacturing, their apps can sync inventory with real-time production and purchase updates so you never run out of stock. And when it comes time for accounting, that's also fully automated. Odoo can create invoices and track expenses and even summarize data with AI to save you hundreds of hours. You know what the best part is? You can choose your apps and even build custom workflows. So it's like all fully tailored to your business's specific needs. Take your business to the next level by consulting with an Odoo expert today for free at odoo.com/sidebar. So I want to talk about this and more, a lot more. I'm here with attorney Imran Ansari. Imran, great to see you. Thank you for taking the time. First of all, your reaction to what Steve had to say. I mean, does he have a point? There's a lot of people that want to know what's happening with this case. Do you think it's wrong to limit the amount of members of the public that should be in there? Do you think it's wrong to not have more cameras, more video, more transparency?
Well, there is a public right to access, right? And this is a trial that's going to really be grabbing the public's attention. We know that. But at the same time, the judge needs to balance maintaining order in the courtroom. And that's also regarding seating and who's in the courtroom and when they are in the courtroom. And certainly just a very practical consideration, the space in the courtroom. Now, this is it's a small amount being allocated to members of the public to get into that courtroom. And of course, as you pointed out, Jesse, it's not like there's going to be cameras broadcasting or a feed in a spillover room where people could sit and watch, which has happened in other trials where there's a lot of public attention and interest. So that is one consideration. But then also the prime importance for the court, for the prosecutor, for the defendant, is to have a fair trial and an orderly trial, and including this hearing, so all the preliminary matters leading up to trial. And that's really a consideration that the judge has here. I'm sure there's going to be challenges to that, perhaps some motions filed by members of the press or the public to try to get some access in there. But really, this the judge's discretion to make sure that there's order in the courtroom, and certainly that there's enough space and it's not turned into a circus within that courtroom.
Look, I'm biased. I would like more attention. I would like more transparency here. I think particularly for a high profile case like this in a matter of public interest, that's just my take. But, look, again, I really would like to see more, but I understand the court's considerations and I understand the considerations of the defendant as well. What about the idea of Celeste's family being called as witnesses during this preliminary hearing? Do you think that's likely? I mean, for me, if I'm thinking about it, I wonder if they would testify to what they knew about this alleged illegal sexual relationship between Celeste and David.
Yeah, they very well may be called. I think the prosecution has a lot of evidence, put aside the family and what they may have to say about their observations or what they learned or heard from Celeste or later learned, based on some of the evidence that came out afterwards. And certainly the reporting of her missing, there was that first time and then she returned. And then the second time, right? That may be information or evidence and testimony that the prosecution wants to put forward in this preliminary hearing. But I also think that the prosecution has a lot of evidence, whether it be the forensic evidence, the circumstantial evidence vis-a-vis the electronic data and location data that they have, that they may not need to call the family into that courtroom. So, we'll see.
I want to get into that because I want to take this potentially witness by witness, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit here because this just happened. I'm going to get into what we can expect from the preliminary hearing and who we can expect to testify. So I'm not going in order because what just came out, there was this video from Asia Collins. Okay, this is a person that we believe to be David's former friend. She posted a Twitch live stream on her account earlier this month. It was titled, "Welp, Let's Talk." Here's a portion of what she said on that live stream.
So immediately I go to David and I'm like, hey, this girl's saying that you're with a 13-year-old. You need to explain yourself. He was like, dude, that's not even true. Like, she's like 19. And I was like, no, she's not. She said she's 13. Like, show me proof. And you know what? He showed me proof. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna back off. I feel like I'm harassing my friend.
And by the way, TMZ also reported that back in June, she posted online seemingly calling David a psychopath who lied and betrayed everyone around him. So she makes the point, look, how much more did you want me to question him? It's not like I just took his word. You know, he's saying you show me proof. I'm not sure what you want me more to do, but she clearly doesn't believe him now. And she was trying to make the point to clarify the situation, but she was like, she pressed him. You know, she was balancing between pressing him about this alleged relationship at the same time, not harassing who she thought was a friend. I feel like that's significant. I feel like she's going to testify, no?
Yeah, she very well may be, and she put it out there, right? So she's certainly on the radar of the prosecution and everyone else who's really following this case and the events that led up to David's arrest and the horrific death here of Celeste Rivas. So, you know, she may very well be someone who would come in and potentially testify about that contemporaneous sort of interaction with David at that time, where she's questioning the age. He's now coming to her and perhaps giving her false information, giving her false information at that time. And it could be a real credibility sort of question there if there's any sort of defense put forward by the defense as to not knowing her age and the thing and all that. But we see the evidence. And I think that's not necessarily going to hold up.
I thought she might also testify because there was a portion where she said in this, she goes, there's not much more I'm paraphrasing, she goes, there's not much more I can say for legal reasons. So that makes me think like she might testify. Let's also talk about Neil Langston for a minute. Okay, Neil Langston is somebody who has come up throughout the course of this case. This is another one of David's apparent friends who ran in a circle. We know a few months back, there was a video obtained by TMZ. It was posted apparently from July 2025 showing what appears to be David and Langston at what seems to be this Hollywood Hills property, with David saying the smell is from him going to the bathroom. And a prosecution filing states that David, quote, lied to friends, business associates, and others about that strong smell of decay in and around the home and the car. And Neil Langston, he was arrested in Montana, was seemingly brought back to LA to testify before a grand jury. In fact, last week we learned the defense is going to receive copies of transcripts from grand jury proceedings, including the day we believe Langston showed up in court. Remember, a few months ago, TMZ captured footage of him reportedly entering the courthouse. TMZ also reported that he was only testifying in front of a grand jury for about 30 to 40 minutes. It raises questions about what did he actually testify to, whether he pleaded the fifth. But we also know he, too, took to social media after all this. There was an Instagram story post where he seemingly called David a D-head, posted, quote, thankfully, I'm legally fine in every way. And boy, do I got all my receipts for things. Ha, 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 ha. Then he reportedly posted, I think the worst part is that I've told so many people that I trust and I thought knew me as a person, my side of things, all for that to be thrown out the effing window as soon as I get arrested and they slap that D-head's name next to mine. And for the record, the thing I was arrested for wasn't even charged. They never filed it, and my warrant was retracted because there is more to the story than what's on the news. Is he going to tell his story at this preliminary hearing, or is he going to plead the fifth? Is he going to be called as a witness?
Yeah, I think he may be, right? No, he already went into the grand jury, and, you know, we don't know yet what that testimony was, if any, and whether he took the fifth at that point. But then he's also at the same time, Jesse, going out there on social media and putting this message out there, which may be a little cryptic, but it's enough to decipher that is related to this and to David. That's certainly there. And if he was represented by counsel, you would, and he was not has not given any testimony or any statements that's going to be used by the prosecution, you certainly would think that he would have had the advice. You better not go out there on social media and start yapping, by an attorney. So I think he may testify. I think he probably did testify before that grand jury as to the smells, the observations, the things that he learned or he was told by David as this was being covered up allegedly. And I think that he may very well testify at this preliminary hearing because it's part of the prosecution's case and it gives context aside from the forensic evidence, aside from the geographical evidence that's gleaned from the Tesla and from the phone, etc. It's a live witness coming in as to observations that he saw.
Would he be granted immunity? Is that something we would learn during the course of this preliminary hearing? Is that something the defense could ask him if he testifies?
Certainly so, right? So if the prosecution struck a deal with him and if there was any sort of leniency or not immunity given, of course, in grand jury, that's commonly done. Even with this preliminary hearing, if there's any sort of deal with the prosecution, that's going to be exploited in any way they can from the defense team. But then again, can you score points even if you are attacking credibility? Because this isn't necessarily a credibility determination if he does take the stand. It's really going to the observations that individual made at that Hollywood Hills house, his interactions with David,
right,
and not so much something where, all right, he cut a deal with the prosecution to get out of any sort of culpability here.
Imran, let me just take a step back for a second. So I'm jumping ahead to these witnesses who may be called. I think the first witnesses to testify for the prosecution in a preliminary hearing are the lead detectives, no? I mean, the ones that are going to kind of summarize all the evidence. Based on LA County District Attorney Nathan Hochman, he had this press conference when it was announced that David was arrested. And I recall he said at the time that the LAPD detectives on the case are Josh Byers and Corey Farrell. Aren't they going to be the main witnesses at this prelim?
Yeah, Jesse, I think they will because you have to analyze or look at the real purpose of this hearing, right? It's a preliminary hearing to determine probable cause and whether David is going to go to trial here and the evidence was sufficient to support the charges brought against him. So what are you going to do in terms of a prosecution standpoint? You want to get that evidence before the jury and you're going to have to establish chain of custody and things like that and observations by law enforcement, what led into the investigation here for probable cause to arrest. And you're going to do that through those detectives. And this case really is a law enforcement investigation heavy case because you have the discovery of the body in the Tesla and sort of the working your way back from a law enforcement standpoint, an investigatory standpoint, where you're looking at that geodata, when you're looking at, the purchases that David is allegedly making for those very damning and incriminating sort of items for concealment of the body. And then you're also looking at and getting in evidence and testimony through the detectives, through law enforcement, as to the recovery of things like the inflatable pool once they get the search warrant. That's all damning evidence here for the alleged allegations against David and ultimately for the prosecution to make their case. And specifically in this preliminary hearing, Jesse, I think that's what they're going to lead with because they want that out there before the court early on to establish the evidence and the sufficiency of that evidence.
One of the biggest question marks from the prosecution's prior filing was they claimed David stabbed Celeste and watched her bleed out. Do you think the prosecution, through these lead detectives or maybe another witness, is going to explain how they know that, how they know that he allegedly watched her bleed out? Are they just assuming that because they claim that no one called emergency services? Or do they have a witness? Are these detectives going to say, we have surveillance footage of this? Or is that, again, am I just looking too much into it and they're saying they watched her bleed out because he allegedly didn't call emergency services?
Yeah, so Jesse, when I read that in some reporting, that was my literally, that was my initial reaction. Like, how do they know that to make that allegation that he watched her bleed out, right? And I had that same sort of question. So I'm thinking through it. It may not necessarily be something as clear cut as surveillance footage or a witness who we probably would have heard about if there was anyone present during this when this happened. And I think there it's pretty clear there wasn't. It may be supported by medical evidence, although she was so decomposed, the body parts, that we know that the medical examiner also struggled with the determination at one point of death and things like that, right? So it could just be speculation at some points, right? That there was no assistance called, 911 wasn't called. We know at least that there were penetrating wounds that led to the death, and that likely there wasn't any sort of remedy or medical treatment in terms of David allegedly placing anything to stem the bleeding or things like that. So I think we're not necessarily against some clear damning evidence such as surveillance, but I think you could put two and two together, and that's where they get that statement.
Do you think these lead detectives are going to finally reveal the text messages between David and Celeste, or is there going to be a Cellbrite expert or somebody from digital forensics? Because you go back to the prosecution's brief, and they say that there are these text message exchanges between the defendant and the victim on April 22nd and April 23rd, 2025, where the victim threatened to expose the defendant and destroy his career. That the night prior, April 22nd, 2025, defendant and the victim engaged in a lengthy argument described in detail in their text messages. The messages revealed the victim's jealousy over defendant's relationships with other women, as defendant led her to believe they had a future together. She became extremely upset and threatened to disclose damaging information about her relationship with defendant to end his career and destroy his life. So do you think that either the lead investigators or somebody from digital forensics is going to testify to those, the content, the substance of those messages?
Yeah, absolutely, Jesse. I think we're going to see those text messages. We already know the substance or the sum and substance of those text messages based on those filings. And the prosecution is likely to call someone from the cell phone carrier or an investigatory body that is able to lay the evidentiary foundation for those text messages to come into evidence. And of course, the detectives or law enforcement staff who ultimately took those or were able to get that off his phone or any other methods to get those messages that were exchanged between the two. But I certainly believe that we're going to see those text messages. And of course, the prosecution doesn't have to show or prove motive, but there's always a desire. This is a preliminary hearing, but let's say this goes to trial, a desire from the jury to hear motive, for a complete narrative as to why something so tragic happened. And those text messages give the prosecution the ability to argue motive here in this case, whereas there's the jealousy, the threat to expose him right when he's about to release that that premiere or the first album, go on tour, and he's on the sort of verge of stardom there. So that's that motive there, and I think we're going to see the text messages really taking a front role in the evidence here.
I think you might also hear from like his managers or agents or people around him to talk about the height of his career too, right? If they're trying to prove special circumstances allegations, killing for financial gain, I think a part of it they would have to establish where was he at in his career? Why did he need Celeste to be quiet?
Absolutely, and I think that's the story, or at least the theory that the prosecution is going to be putting forward before that jury.
By the way, in terms of this alleged child pornography, right, that they claim is on David's devices, is that something that I imagine will be presented at a preliminary hearing through the lead detectives?
To some extent, Jesse, I think, right? We've heard about that child pornography, whether it's photographs or videos of Celeste Rivas. I believe that may be the case, and we're not going to see that certainly, but we may hear about that. And I think we're going to hear the testimony about that being recovered off the cell phone, because again, it goes to some aspects of the crimes that he's charged with, of course. And I think we're certainly going to learn about that. And to the extent that he has it, I think it was a relatively sizable amount, if I understand correctly. But that's going to be damning evidence ultimately for him when it's relevant to some of the crimes that he's charged with.
I also have to imagine the manager of the tow yard, the crime scene technicians, talking about what they discovered in that Tesla is going to be also one of the reasons why this is a 3-day hearing. There's so much to it, but I imagine that's something we could expect too, right?
Certainly, right. And again, that goes towards the weight and the sufficiency of the evidence and ultimately the probable cause here. And I certainly think we're going to hear about it. And it's going to be difficult to hear when you learn about the dismemberment, the torso and the head in one bag, and then the body, the missing fingers. It's gruesome, gruesome stuff. And whenever you hear about this, certainly with a public figure like David, of course, there are allegations, but these allegations here, they're really difficult to stomach. And, the aspects about this inflatable pool and what happened in that Hollywood Hills home as the allegations are put forth, it's difficult to listen to. And certainly if you see the photographic evidence, which in this courtroom may very well be the case, it's going to be difficult to see. That's
horrifying. It makes you think about a jury that's going to ultimately see this if this goes to trial, and also her family if the family is in the courtroom. Let's talk about the medical examiner. I actually think the medical examiner is going to be a key witness for multiple reasons. First of all, if you go to the death investigation report, it might be several people. It lists out medical examiner investigator Karen Tapia, deputy medical examiner Dr. Ansel Nam, supervisor deputy medical examiner Dr. Grant Ho, forensic technician Daniel Garcia. Not sure everybody's going to testify, but the cause and manner of Celeste's death are key. And I do wonder not only what the substance of that testimony is going to be and how it's going to be presented, but also what the defense is going to do. Right? Because if you go to the report, it says death was pronounced at the scene. Autopsy examination was limited by extensive post-mortem changes. There are 2 penetrating wounds of the torso with smooth edges that may represent sharp force injuries. The wound on the upper abdomen penetrates the liver, and the wound on the left chest penetrates one of the left intercostal spaces with disruption of the adjacent ribs' cortical surfaces. The left lung appears intact. The bilateral upper and lower extremities show full thickness dismemberment. Multiple other skin and soft tissue defects are present without apparent associated internal injuries. The etiology of these defects is not clearly apparent due to severe postmortem changes. Postmortem toxicology performed on liver tissue shows the presence of a low level of ethanol, which may be due to postmortem changes or ingestion, and does not appear to be contributory to the cause of death. Given the history and circumstances as currently known by me in the setting of the findings by examination, ancillary studies, and in the absence of other definitive causes of death, the cause of death is multiple penetrating injuries. The manner of death is classified as homicide. You will not have this case without that kind of testimony. So Imran, 2 questions to you here. 1, what can we expect from this witness or witnesses? And 2, this to me feels like we're really going to see the defense challenging the prosecution's evidence, because his attorneys originally said when he was arrested, the actual evidence in this case will show that David Burke did not murder Celeste Rivas Hernandez, and he was not the cause of her death. Talk to me.
Sure. So let's take that into 2 parts, right? From the evidentiary standpoint, what do we hear from these medical examiners? Well, certainly the methodology that they used in analyzing and evaluating the body, right? That's going to be out there in that courtroom. And again, it goes to the sufficiency of the evidence and what leads the prosecution to bringing these charges against Burke, right? So that's what we're going to hear from them. And I'm certainly, again, same, you're going to hear about the condition of the body. It's going to probably be difficult to hear about the decomposition of the body and how they came to the ultimate medical opinion or analysis as to the manner of death and the cause of death. With the penetration wounds, et cetera. Now, pivot to the defense standpoint. This is your opportunity from a defense standpoint to really challenge the evidence. There's so much which circumstantially and the other forensic evidence and data and the purchase history and all that doesn't really bode well for Burke in this case, for David in this case. But when you look at the ME and the sort of the analysis they did, that's some ground where you may be able to achieve from a defense standpoint in attacking the sufficiency of that. Was this body too decomposed to really reasonably get to that opinion from the medical examiner? So we expect that the defense is going to do something right on their end in terms of challenging the evidence. And I think this may be one point, one area of evidence that they may be able to score some points.
I think also might testify? Riverside County Sheriff's Department deputies, because you go back to this idea of trying to establish that there was this alleged relationship between David and Celeste, which makes up its own set of charges, but also goes to the special circumstances, the motive, all that. So, and this goes back to the prosecution's filing. So much of that was about her allegedly, going missing, them going to David, right? Trying to contact him denying that he had a relationship or really knew her that well, that didn't know she was a minor. To me, I feel like that's going to be a portion of this case too, although it does become a question, how much does the prosecution need to actually present at a preliminary hearing to meet that low burden?
Yeah, certainly. And I think we may hear it, right? Because the prosecution, put yourself in their shoes for a moment. They want to come in strong here. They don't want to leave anything to chance, right? If you have the evidence and you have the testimony, you should present it. And I think you may hear about that, right? Sort of that evasiveness or, untruths potentially as alleged here from David. And that really does go to a consciousness of guilt potentially, and they want to put that before the court, right? There's no need. You already know about it. The defense already knows about it. No one's sort of scoring any points by keeping it back. And I think we may hear that evidence. Certainly it would benefit the prosecution if they put that before the court, sort of the demeanor and the statements being made by David when he is, brought in for questioning. So I expect that we're going to hear that evidence.
Before I let you go, one last thought I had was whether or not we are going to hear from David's family as witnesses. Number one, we know that there was reporting that they were trying to fight the subpoenas to testify, presumably at grand juries or grand jury. But we also believe, or at least I believe, that they may be asked, what were your interactions with Celeste? What did you see between David and Celeste? There was this part about it where you go back to the prosecution's filing, and they say that she had spent a significant amount of time with him, including at his home in Texas to meet his family, but also the car itself, the Tesla, right? The Tesla itself, there is reporting, according to authorities, it was registered to David in Hempstead, Texas. You think his family is going to make an appearance, testify at this preliminary hearing?
Possibly, right? There is that interesting fact that you just mentioned was that, he took her to meet his family, right? So they had the opportunity at that point to observe the relationship, their interactions with one another. And if the prosecution finds that that's going to somehow move the ball forward here at this hearing, you may hear from them. I certainly think you may hear from them if this does go to trial before a jury, because then obviously the depth of the evidence and the broadness of the evidence is going to be all the much more greater there. So you may hear from them at this preliminary hearing. You may not. I don't think the prosecution necessarily has to call them. And also with the registration of the car, they may be able to get that in certain other ways, take judicial notice of the registration of the car. But, they are potential witnesses here. And certainly at trial, I think you may hear from them.
Imran Ansari, thanks so much for coming on. We'll see what happens tomorrow.
Thanks for having me, Jesse.
And that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. You can also check us out on NBC's Peacock as well. If you want to follow me, X, Instagram, my News Nation show, Jesse Weber Live, Monday through Friday, 11 p.m. Eastern. See you next time, everybody.